The dark city of Commoragh is home to perhaps the most twisted of races to ever inhabit real space. In truth, it's not really a city at all, more like a sub-dimension bound to other sub-dimensions within the labyrinthine webway. Maintaining any form of rulership in Commoragh is difficult at the best of times, and violence and intrigue running rampant only makes it harder. And yet, for millennia, there has been stable leadership, well, as stable as this species can get anyway. Whilst rule over the Dark City is given to one in particular, the whole power structure of Commoragh is built from the ideals he established when he seized power millennia ago. Having already explored two of the triumvirate of powerful factions in Commoragh, today we complete the set and explore the third, the largest, and the most powerful of them all, the Drukhari Kabals. This is Tactica, Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. In a log ago, we discussed the origins of the Drukhari in the fall of the Eldari and the later revolution that established the Kabals. But for the sake of completeness, let's get everybody up to speed on at least Kabalite history to prevent too much trawling through the archives. Back in the early days of the Drukhari, the rulers of Commoragh were elitist and murderous noble houses from before the fall of the Eldari, having been unaffected by the fall due to Commoragh being sheltered within the webway. They didn't actually refer to themselves as the Drukhari or the Dark Eldar back then. They just carried on as normal, albeit weaving in the need to feed on pain to stave off Slaanesh as part of their daily routine. All that would change starting from sometime in M32, with the birth of a slave known simply as Vect. This individual swore that one day, somehow, he would become the ruler of Commoragh, but whilst I'm sure many say it, Vect was actually willing to put the work in to make it happen. He founded a warrior-based group known as the Cult of the Black Heart, and they were the first of the Eladrith Ineas, as the Drukhari are known in the Eldari tongue, to refer to themselves openly as such. They laid out a code known as the 13 Foundations of Vengeance, and agents of the Black Heart were seeded throughout Commorite society in secret to prepare for the ascension of their new master. In M33, the Black Heart would be given an opportunity to rise to a measure of prominence in the War of the Sun and the Moon. Commorragh's suns, whilst still being actual stars, were stolen from real space and placed over the Dark City. Don't ask how, I don't know. They were controlled at the time by solar cults, presumably to stop a single noble house from using a sun or several suns as leverage or as weapons. But the cults themselves began to assert more power and influence in this period before actually declaring war on the ruling nobles. With Commoragh now in darkness, wars raged in the city skies for centuries. The Black Heart entered on the side of the nobles and proved instrumental in securing overall victory. The cult was now referring to itself as a cabal, and before long the nobles had become more than a little aware of the threat posed by the Archon calling himself Asdrubael Vect. The most powerful of the noble houses defied and opposed the cabal in all matters in an attempt to check Vect's growing power, but the Archon had a plan that would see his rise to supremacy at their expense. In what appeared to be a titanic roll of the dice, but was instead a perfectly engineered masterstroke, Vect and his forces plundered real space and then left the door to Commoragh wide open on their return in M35. They even captured an Astarte strike cruiser investigating the increased raids in the region, trapping it in a haywire field and towing it to Commoragh with its Space Marine cargo intact and alive. Of course, the noble houses seized the ship and all rights to it, but Vect's cabal were actually given salvage rights back once the nobles found the Astartes of the Salamanders chapter a bit too tough to crack. After days of siege and intentionally sacrificing his least trusted Kabalites in the strike cruiser, Vect got what he was hoping for. The Imperium of Man launched a full-scale invasion of Commoragh through the jammed open webway gate, spearheaded by a battle barge of the Salamanders supported by ships from other chapters. The armies of Commoragh raced to respond, but Vect had yet more plans in place to ensure the fall of the houses that had denied him. Through a pact made with Lelith Hesperax and the witch cult of Strife, one of the three leading nobles was assassinated in the midst of the invasion. The arriving battle barge crashed headlong into the spire containing Lord Zelian, who had initially seized the strike cruiser, and a stray shot from a dark lance obliterated the last of the lords on Vect's hit list. Under normal circumstances for the Drukhari, they might have returned, reborn by the homunculi given enough time and patience. But these contracts went unfulfilled, and any remains that could have been collected were dragged away by the shadowy figures known as mandrakes. By seeding Commoragh with his agents and forging alliances with those in positions to aid him, Vect had in one move taken out all of his opposition without so much as having to lift a finger. The brutality of the Space Marines did the rest, and the captured strike cruiser was even able to make a clean getaway alongside the rest of the Imperial fleet after the Haywire field inexplicably failed. The annihilation and humiliation of the noble houses of Commoragh was complete, and the cavernous power vacuum left in the Dark City was filled, of course, by the Cabal of the Black Heart. Rather than deflect blame or remain silent on the matter, Vect took full responsibility for the Imperial raid on Commoragh. It was his message to all who dared oppose him that his Cabal could not be stopped, and that to stand even remotely in his way or even think of turning against him would end in a brutal, swift death due to his impossibly intricate planning and his network of allies. Realizing immediately which way the metaphorical wind was blowing, any surviving noble houses transformed and reworked themselves into Kabals as new ones sprung up across the Dark City, but they never forgot or forgave the betrayal of the Archon. Not that Vect probably cared, as he took control of Commoragh entire as Supreme Overlord, tightening his grip over the millennia and integrating sub-dimensions of the webway into it as well. So it has been ever since Vect's dramatic coup d'etat, and so it shall likely always be unless Vect is somehow slain and the whole system is toppled, which is exceptionally unlikely, but not impossible, I suppose. So, that's the history lesson done, so let's move on to some sociology and politics lessons and explore what exactly the Kabals actually are. A Cabal, much like the original Black Heart, is both a military and a political organisation, with its ranks being made up of vast amounts, perhaps millions of elite soldiers ruled over by generals with a gift for intrigue and scheming. Though they all are secondary to Vect and the Black Heart in terms of power and influence, the rulers known as Archons are left to rule their Cabals as they see fit. They are top of the metaphorical food chain unless they draw the ire of a more powerful Cabal in a position to squash them. The only code amongst the Archons is not actually the 13 Foundations of Vengeance, but instead that of an eye for an eye, meaning that to trifle with or slight an Archon is a dangerous game indeed. However, it is impossible for an Archon to become comfortable in their situation, but to do so will usually see said station lost in short order. Most Drukhari are ambitious megalomaniacs with a desire to rule, and attempted coups and schemes for greater power are commonplace. The Archons are aware of all of this and make sure that such ideas are quashed brutally and political opponents are taken out in order to secure their own influence. If a member of a Cabal steps out of line or tries to strive above their station, they will be put in place, if not put in the ground, to ensure that the message gets across to everyone. In essence, a Cabal is a microcosm of all of Commoragh, a meritocracy where the strongest and smartest rise to the top over the corpses of those who dare oppose them. This, though, raises a question. If Carbalite life is so dangerous, and it is, why join up? There are two reasons, both of which are fundamentally key to the survival of the Drukhari as both individuals and arguably as a species. The first is, ironically enough, security. If you're part of a Cabal, you're as safe as it is possible to be in Commoragh. This is because you do not trifle with or attempt to kill a Carbalite if you like being alive. To attack one is to attack the Cabal as a whole, and no individual is going to last that long against thousands of highly trained Carbalites and their allies. Sure, those within the Cabal are still a threat, but the aforementioned brutal punishments will keep many in line, and you can probably work as an agent of the Archon if you want a little more protection. Even other Cabals think carefully about the prospect of inter-Cabal war, especially ones of a similar or higher standing. It is rare for one to be wiped out unless Vect engineers it, but any risk of lost influence or life can occasionally be enough to deter even a crafty or bloodthirsty Archon. I say occasionally because every day and every night the Kabals do in fact wage war amongst themselves. The Supreme Overlord ensures it, since it keeps the Kabals focused on each other and unable to challenge him. The second reason is the one that makes the Drukhari so infamous to the rest of the galaxy: the realspace raids. As a rule of thumb, it will be the Kabals who plan and execute the vast majority of realspace raids. They have the most resources to do it, and arguably the most to gain in terms of resources and renown if they can pull it off. This means that to get to participate in a raid, you usually need to be a Kabalite, and a trusted one at that. But why do you want to be part of a realspace raid? It's exceptionally dangerous, perhaps even more so than Commoragh itself, and despite the meticulous planning of the Archon, the chaos of war means it can go wrong at a moment's notice. It's because of the rejuvenating effects of pain and suffering on the Drukhari. Sure, watching a bloody show in the witch cult arenas can be satisfying and stave off the thirst brought on by the fall, but being able to fight in person, inflict that pain, witness the suffering firsthand, is a rush beyond all others that can sustain a Kabalite for far longer. And that's just for one kill. Being at the heart of a maelstrom of violence that is a realspace raid can drive a Drukhari beyond their capabilities with improved speed and resilience among many other things. As such, any Kabalite worth their salt really wants to be part of a realspace raid if possible, to drink in all that suffering and increase their own standing and thus security within the Cabal. And if they are of a higher standing and happen to die, no problem. For those wealthy enough, the homunculi allied to the Cabal will simply regenerate your body and let you go all over again. This capacity to orchestrate and pull off a successful raid is what helps to determine the standing of a Cabal in the Dark City, and those who prove adept at capturing vast amounts of slaves for the factories or labs or arenas will see their stars rise, at least as far as Vect is willing to let them. Many Kabals will become patrons for one or more witch cults, supplying them with slaves and Kabalite protection in return for prime seats in the arenas and the aid of their warriors in future raids. By hiring mercenary groups such as Incubi or more exotic Xenos, a canny Archon can protect themselves from assassins or schemes far better than with a Kabalite guard who might well be in on the schemes anyway. Thanks to the regenerations carried out by the homunculi, as well as the vast numbers of Vat-grown Drukhari both in and outside the Kabals, there is never a shortage of vicious and willing killers eager to join the Kabals and advance themselves, as shown by the numerous and violent recruitment and initiation rites that have yet to put anyone off that I know. And at the top of the chain in the spires of High Commoragh, Supreme Overlord Vect watches them all, manipulating things both subtly and overtly to his advantage. It is almost total anarchy, but it engineers a stability that has gone unchallenged for over 6 millennia. Archons and Kabals rise and fall almost constantly, but the overall status quo is maintained in the Dark City through the dominion of Vect and the near immortality of those at the top. We've explored elements of the Drukhari leadership before, but let's take this opportunity to explore the more famous Kabals as well as a few less known ones to boot. I don't need to tell you any more about Vect, I banged on about him enough, but the Cabal of the Black Heart he continues to lead are still unique despite providing the template for all other Cabals. Due to its age and its power, the Black Heart is a sprawling organisation far beyond any other Cabal. In fact, it is the only Cabal that does not have a single Archon. It has a single leader, that being Vect, but there are a number of Archons beneath the Supreme Overlord that vie for his favour. Almost anything goes in the quest for Vect's patronage, but for once there is a hard and fast rule. No murdering another Archon. It would deny Vect one of his toys and thus draw his wrath instead, and of course that will end fatally for the Archon at fault. Each of these Archons will control a faction within the Black Heart, each of which is probably large enough to be a Cabal in its own right if it dared to go independent. But of course it won't, due to the security that being an Archon of the Black Heart provides. It's arguably the safest position in all of Commoragh after Vect's, since your rivals daren't kill you, and the Cabal's protection come spy racket is far superior to the others. You may also wonder whether any of the doubtless numerous Archons below the Supreme Overlord over the years have ever made a play for his position. And the answer is almost certainly yes, but none have ever come close. As mentioned a moment ago, the spy network of the Black Heart is incredibly vast, and every Archon will be keeping a watchful eye on their rivals as well. So even if Vect was unaware of the schemes under him, his subordinates would root it out in an attempt to win his favour. But it is also said that the Supreme Overlord can smell the scent of treachery, though I have no idea if it's true, and any who have dreamt of usurping him were dealt with in a manner befitting the crime of highest possible treason. More likely than not, they'll be dealt with schemes so subtle as to not reveal Vect's hand at all, but I don't doubt that it'll be made perfectly clear what happened in the aftermath, even if no one realised beforehand what was afoot. This again maintains Vect's dominion over the Black Heart and thus over all of Commoragh as well. Though the Black Heart will likely always be the most powerful of the Kabals, perhaps the next strongest is an ally turned enemy, the Cabal of the Poisoned Tongue. Led by Lady Aurelia Malice, a former lover of Vect and someone we discussed in a previous log, the Poisoned Tongue have many allies and agents embedded across Commorragh's different factions, including the passing Harlequins. They are renowned for duplicity even amongst the already duplicitous Drukhari, able to run rings around their adversaries with their words alone. They may be known as the Poisoned Tongue, but it's a silver tongue as well. Often able to use their allies to preserve their own strength and strike from the least expected angle, the Poisoned Tongue has recently broken its alliance with the Black Heart due to concerns of Lady Malice concerning Kane's Gate. Both Vect and Malice suspected the other of attempting to trigger the Gate, flooding Commoragh and their Cabal's forces in demons. It culminated in a massive civil war between the Kabals and their numerous agents, despite the fact that they actually both wanted the Gate to stay closed. In the end, the rise of Iniad and Ivrain would shatter the Gate in a disjunction anyway, so nobody really won. However, even before these events, at the end of what the Drukhari called the Age of Plenty, the Poisoned Tongue were not necessarily the strongest of Cabals in Commoragh, even discounting the Black Heart. That honour instead fell, and presumably still falls, to the group known as the Cabal of the Flayed Skull, second only to the Black Heart, at least in terms of pure military power. Led as far as we know by the Archon Vresk, an individual who began his military career riding a Reaver jet bike but rising up to the top, the Flayed Skull are experts in airborne warfare with whom many pilots will try and align themselves. Such is their skill in this style of combat that they can raid and even conquer worlds without ever touching the planet's surface, with a world of unknown class and alignment known as Thrandium being the best known example. They make their home in a toxic complex known as the Poisoned Crown, with Vresk taking the epithet of Murder Prince of the region, and their allies include a succubus of the renowned witch cult of Strife and a homunculus of the feared prophets of Flesh Coven. And finally, we have two Cabals led by a pair of twins, perhaps linked to the historical solar cults of Commoragh, the Cabals of the Dying Sun and the Falling Moon. The former, the Dying Sun, are one of the oldest Cabals in Commoragh and are highly regarded in turn, with artifacts as old as the Eldari Empire that the Drukhari arguably collapsed. They also supposedly show a disdain for all things young. Their headquarters is even known as the Pinnacle of Disdain as it happens, and whilst other Cabals mock them for it, the Dying Sun claim they can do as their name suggests, cause a sun to die and be extinguished. Their Archon, Vol Zolanth, apologies for the probably butchered pronunciation, is obsessed with the light-dark transition and the symbolism behind it, and so the Dying Sun's real space raids often happen as the light fades into sunset. However, his twin brother Eupolion is a foe far beyond typical sibling rivalry, as he leads the arch-enemies of the Dying Sun, the Cabal of the Falling Moon. Another ancient Cabal, it is believed that the Falling Moon are linked to, or perhaps even descended from, the lunar sects of Commoragh, so it is perhaps no surprise that a solar cult or associate with them would be a natural enemy. Less is known about them as opposed to the Dying Sun, but the twins and their Cabals are waging a war of sorts against one another, fighting over the Yulia system, location unknown. Napoleon is apparently obsessed with moons and other satellites, which may explain why he joined the Cabal he now leads, and his plan for the system would be to destroy every planet and satellite in it. On the other hand, his brother leading the dying sun wishes to, well, make the sun die and put it out for good. Assumedly, this has led to both arguments and running battles between the Cabals in Julia and in Commoragh, but the details are unknown, and all the maledictum-associated chaos probably means we won't know the fate of the system for a long time, regardless of who, if anyone, wins. And there you have it, an insight into the Cabals of the Drukhari. The undisputed rulers of Commoragh all take inspiration from the original Under the City's Overlord, all but untouchable meritocracies where the strongest and smartest rise until they find a dagger in their back. Their warriors are among the elite of Commorite society, their agents walk through all rungs of the Dark City, and to challenge one is to invite naught but a swift and painful death. There are likely more stories of the Kabals hidden away, but for the sake of getting out of Commoragh alive, we're going to move on. Next time, I think we're going to jump into something I'm amazed I've never fully covered properly. A long time ago, we looked at the traitor legions and explored their fall to chaos, but I've never extended that discussion to the general case. So we're going to look at what can cause the fall of the Adeptus Astartes, as well as some of the more famous traitor forces outside of the legions. Thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.